If we take the height of Mount Everest, we would still have about a mile of water above us before we get to the ocean's surface.
Spend a lot of time and effort developing submarine hunting technology.
7 miles down, pressure that turns steel into paper, and something was moving through it, like it was nothing. Nothing that size, nothing that intact, nothing that alive is supposed to survive down there. But it did. Calm, unbothered, sitting at the very bottom of the planet. Scientists spent 60 years insisting this place was dead, a lightless, crushing wasteland with nothing in it. Then a camera went down where no camera had ever clearly gone before. And what it filmed didn't just surprise them. It sent them back to recheck everything they thought they knew. Before we reveal what the camera captured, hit like and subscribe, because the truth at the bottom is stranger than fiction. So what exactly did that camera catch down there? Let's find out. Setting the scene. The year is 2019. A specially engineered submersible begins its descent into Earth's deepest scar, the Mariana Trench. Understand what this actually is. It's not a stunt. It's one person sealed into a metal sphere, deliberately lowering themselves into a place that has no rescue plan, no backup team, and no margin for error. At first, the water outside the viewport is bright, the ordinary blue of any calm day at sea. But as the sub sinks, that light starts draining away. Within minutes, darkness closes in so completely that you could press your palm against the glass and not see your own fingers. There's no wind down here, no waves, no creak of a hull settling against the surface. Just the low, steady hum of the life support systems and one human being descending, alone, into nothing. The descent takes nearly 4 hours. 4 hours of sinking through water that gets darker and colder and heavier with every passing minute. And with every meter, the pressure climbs toward a number the human mind isn't built to picture. By the time the submersible reaches the bottom, the pressure outside the hull has crossed 16,000 pounds per square inch. Sit with that for a second, because it isn't an abstract statistic. It means if one seal fails, if the engineering makes a single small mistake, a human body wouldn't be injured. It would simply cease to exist, faster than the nervous system could even register pain. At just under 36,000 feet, the sub finally settles onto the ocean floor. And in that moment, humanity touches the lowest point it can reach anywhere on its own planet. Think about the kind of person who chooses this. No one ordered this dive. There was no safety net waiting below. He went down anyway, because he understood something most of us never stop to consider. We've mapped the surface of Mars in finer detail than we've mapped the floor of our own ocean. As of 2019, the deepest place on Earth was still, in a very real sense, more of a mystery than the surface of the moon. Then the lights came on, and the camera started to record, understanding the place itself. To understand why what that camera caught was so disturbing, you first have to understand exactly what kind of place it was filming. This isn't an ordinary stretch of sea floor. It's a subduction zone, a place where one massive tectonic plate is slowly grinding underneath another, a process that has been tearing this wound into the Earth's crust for millions of years. Here's the simplest way to feel the scale of it. Take Everest. Drop it in. Its peak would still be sitting nearly a mile beneath the surface of the water above it. A full mile of ocean stacked on top of the tallest mountain on the planet before you'd ever reach open air. The pressure at the bottom is beyond 1,000 atmospheres, roughly 1,000 times the weight of the air sitting on you right now, pressing on every square inch of everything down there, all at once. The cold is just as merciless, hovering barely above freezing, permanently. But the part that gets under your skin is the darkness. Sunlight gives out at around 3,000 feet. The floor of this trench sits nearly 10 times deeper than that. For billions of years, not one photon of sunlight has ever reached it. It's so completely black that it makes no difference whether your eyes are open or shut. You'd see exactly the same nothing either way. And where there's no light, there are no plants. Where there are no plants, nothing down there is making its own food. Whatever nourishment exists has to fall from somewhere else. Dead material drifting down from the sunlit world above, sometimes taking days just to reach the bottom. Picture it. Something dies near the surface, miles up, and its remains begin a slow, silent freefall through layer after layer of darkening water, until, days later, what's left of it finally lands on a floor that has never once seen daylight. That's the food supply. That's the entire menu. Crushing weight, freezing cold, total blackness. And a few scraps raining down from a world this place will never see. Look at that list, and the conclusion seems obvious. Nothing should be able to live down there. We were so certain of it, we named the zone after the underworld. Scientists still call it the Hadal Zone, after Hades. We labeled it the land of the dead before we'd ever properly looked. Why everyone was so sure? For most of human history, scientists believed the deepest parts of the ocean were almost completely lifeless. In the 1800s, early expeditions lowered nets into the abyss, but they came back with little more than mud and cold sediment. With every empty haul, researchers became more convinced that the deep sea was nothing more than a dark, underwater desert. Then, in 1960, the submersible Trieste reached Challenger Deep, where its crew reported seeing living creatures on the sea floor. But poor cameras and almost zero visibility meant they couldn't prove what they saw. Their claims were largely dismissed. Before we reveal what modern cameras finally captured, hit like and subscribe, because this discovery changed everything scientists thought they knew. Now, let's dive even deeper. Technology catches up. After 1970, the tools finally started catching up to the mystery. And the moment they did, the old certainty began to crack. Remotely operated vehicles arrived, machines lowered on cables, steered from the surface. Stronger submersibles were built, engineered to survive the pressure while carrying cameras and collecting samples. One by one, these machines crept down into the deep, and the clues they brought back kept whispering the same thing. The story was wrong. Then came 1977, a discovery that hit the scientific world like a thunderclap. On the deep ocean floor, researchers found hydrothermal vents, places where superheated, mineral-rich water pours straight out of the Earth's crust like underwater volcanoes. But the vents themselves weren't the shocking part. What was living around them was entire communities of creatures, growing, feeding, breeding, locked into a complete food chain, all of it thriving in absolute darkness, without a trace of sunlight anywhere near it. That's where a strange new idea forced its way into the conversation: chemosynthesis. It turns out some organisms don't need the sun at all. They build their energy directly out of chemical reactions, which meant life could exist somewhere light had never touched. It rewrote the rules, and it should have been a warning. Every time science drew a hard line and said life cannot cross this, the ocean had already quietly crossed it and was just waiting for us to catch up. But one enormous question stayed buried in the dark. Every one of these vent discoveries was happening at depths of roughly 20 to 25,000 feet. Deep, yes, but not the deepest. What lived even further down, in the true floor of the Hadal trenches, was still a complete blank. The technology simply couldn't reach that far yet. And then, a man decided he was going to go down there and look for himself. The 2019 mission. In 2019, an ambitious expedition set out with one staggering goal: reach the deepest point of every ocean on Earth. And the hardest target of all, the one that had defeated nearly everyone who'd tried before, was Challenger Deep. This time, the difference wasn't just nerve. The submersible built for this mission was engineered specifically to withstand the full, crushing force of the deepest ocean on the planet, stronger and safer than anything that had come before it. And mounted onto its hull was the piece of equipment that would change everything. What came up on those screens did not match that picture at all. Too much life. Every assumption pointed toward the same conclusion. Even if something survived down there, it would be rare, a stray organism here, another scattered somewhere across an empty plain. The mental image everyone carried was a barren floor with almost nothing moving on it. Then the lights hit bottom, and the screen filled with life. Not a lonely survivor clinging to existence, not a single lucky creature caught on camera by chance. Life crowding the frame, not scattered, not rare, everywhere. The first to arrive were amphipods, small, shrimp-like animals. The instant bait touched the water, they swarmed it in numbers so enormous that under the camera light, they stopped looking like individual animals altogether and became a single moving cloud, a living haze churning through the black water toward the food. Imagine being the person watching that live feed. You're braced for an empty grave. What you get instead is a feeding frenzy. For the scientist watching, this wasn't a vague sense of surprise. He could count them. He could measure the density, the sheer packed biomass, in a place his entire field had spent decades describing as nearly empty. Then came the sea cucumbers. Soft, strange shapes, crawling unhurried across the mud, hunting for scraps exactly the way their relatives do in warm, sunlit shallows. No panic, no visible struggle. Nothing about them looked like creatures barely enduring a nightmare. They looked like residents going about an ordinary afternoon. And that ordinariness is the detail that should stop you cold. Everyone expected at best life hanging on by a thread. Tense, desperate, rare. What the camera actually showed was calm, routine. The unbothered movement of animals completely at home, in a place we'd already decided was uninhabitable. That was the first real crack in the old picture. These animals weren't surviving the deep as some kind of desperate last stand. They were living in it comfortably, as if it were the most ordinary place on Earth. The dead desert that generations of scientists had drawn in their minds turned out to be a busy, working neighborhood. And now there was footage to prove it. A hidden ecosystem. The sheer abundance was only the first surprise. The deeper jolt came when the footage was examined more closely, and it became clear just how varied that life actually was. This wasn't one hardy species scraping by in isolation. It was many different kinds of creature living side by side, as if an entire town had quietly assembled itself at the bottom of the world. Even among the amphipods, distinct types stood out. Some thin, some bulky, some darting quickly through the water, while others hugged close to the seabed. The sea cucumbers weren't uniform either. Some grazed slowly across the sediment, while others moved in entirely different patterns, as if each held down a specific role within a larger system. Then came the worms, the isopods, and other shapes that had barely ever been documented at this depth before, all going about their business, none of them isolated. They were wired into each other. A complete food web was quietly humming away down there in the dark. Scavengers worked through drifting dead material. Filter feeders pulled nutrients directly from the water column. Predators hunted the smaller animals living around them. Every creature had a role, a place, a purpose, a system this organized, this balanced, surviving in conditions this brutal, was something nobody had been prepared to find. This wasn't survival. It was a functioning society. And a society like that doesn't appear overnight. A food web this layered, with every niche filled, takes an enormous amount of time to build. It means life didn't simply stumble into this trench and cling on by accident. It settled there, generation after generation, long enough to specialize, divide labor, and shape itself entirely around the dark, which raises an uncomfortable question. How long has this actually been running? Quietly, right beneath us, in the one place we never thought to check. Speed, energy, and the physics of surviving crushed depth. Even after scientists realized the deep ocean was filled with life, one final assumption still remained. Surely, any creature living in such freezing, food-scarce conditions had to be slow, conserving every bit of energy just to survive. It seemed like the only logical conclusion, but the footage proved otherwise. The amphipods weren't just alive, they were incredibly fast. The instant food reached the sea floor, they swarmed it in a frenzy, shoving past one another and competing for every bite. This wasn't the behavior of weak, struggling animals. These were confident, active predators that knew exactly what they were doing. The fish were just as surprising, swimming smoothly and effortlessly, no different from fish cruising through warm coastal waters. They weren't merely surviving, they were thriving. So how is that possible? Their bodies, made mostly of water, stay naturally balanced against the crushing pressure around them. Even more impressive, their proteins, cell membranes, and enzymes are specially adapted to keep functioning under extreme pressure and freezing temperatures. They're built from the same basic biology as us, just fine-tuned in remarkable ways. The deepest ocean proved that life doesn't need to become something entirely different to survive the impossible. Sometimes, it only needs to adapt in exactly the right places. Giants and shadows. The unsettling turn. This is where the story stops being simply amazing and starts crawling under your skin. Because the creatures caught on camera weren't just plentiful and energetic, they were too big. The amphipods were reaching 6 to 8 inches in length, many times the size of their shallow water relatives. And then there was the animal that, more than anything else in the footage, deserves to be called the creature of the deepest ocean, the snailfish. 8 to 10 inches long, with a soft, faintly translucent, almost jelly-like body, it drifted through the beam of light, like something half-finished, pale, ghostly, nearly glowing. You could almost see straight through it. By every old rule of deep-sea biology, it should have been a flattened smear at that depth. Instead, it was whole, fully formed, fins intact, gliding through the most crushing water on the planet as calmly as a goldfish crossing a bowl. Stay on that image, because it matters more than anything else in this story. This isn't a beast with teeth. It isn't a monster. It's a small, gentle, almost delicate creature. And that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. Everyone was braced for some armored survivor built like a tank to withstand the pressure. Instead, the deepest fish ever recorded looks fragile enough to fall apart in your hands. But the real unease doesn't come from what the camera clearly captured. It comes from what it couldn't. the lights only ever illuminated a small bubble of water. Beyond that edge, the darkness was total. And more than once in the footage, the mud on the seafloor seemed to shift and stir, as if something large had just passed through, even though nothing ever clearly entered the frame. A few shapes drifted right at the rim of the light. Some slid past. Some vanished the instant the camera turned toward them. Now, I want to be honest with you here, because this is exactly where stories like this usually go off the rails. There's no proof of a monster down there, none. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Those shifting shadows could easily be silt, current, or nothing more than a trick of a single light source in total blackness. But here's what's actually changed. For generations, anomalies like this, strange sonar returns, odd shapes with no clear match, got dismissed automatically because everyone knew there was nothing complex living down there to make them. That excuse doesn't hold up anymore. Not after watching complex, fast, oversized life thriving comfortably on that floor, recycling the same scraps of energy over and over, wasting almost nothing, and quietly sustaining far more life on far less than anyone thought should be possible. If that last theory is true, the place we spent decades writing off as a dead zone may actually be one of the most stable, efficient ecosystems on the entire planet. But the honest truth is, we don't know. We're staring at a thriving, crowded world in crisp, high definition, and we still can't fully explain what's keeping it alive. Our trash got there first. There's one last thing the cameras found at the bottom of the world, and it might be the detail that should disturb us most, because the place we believed was the most remote, untouched location on the entire planet turned out to already have a visitor. Us. When the submersible finally reached the very floor of Challenger Deep, the deepest point on Earth, the lights picked out a plastic bag and a candy wrapper resting quietly in the silt. 7 miles down, in the one place we were certain no human trace could ever reach, our garbage was already there, waiting, having arrived long before we did, and it goes deeper than the seabed itself. When scientists later examined the amphipods, those tough, thriving little survivors of the most extreme environment on Earth, they found microplastics inside their bodies. The pollution we've poured into the surface world hadn't just sunk to the bottom. It had worked its way inside the animals living there. The most isolated ecosystem we know of is already carrying a piece of us inside it. Sit with that timeline for a second. We didn't even confirm this life truly existed until 2019. And by the time we finally saw it clearly, our waste was already there first, woven into the bodies of creatures we hadn't even properly named yet. What this really means. So hold the whole shape of this in your mind for a moment. For generations, we called the deep ocean dead, and we were wrong. It's alive, crowded, fast, stranger than anyone guessed. We caught one pale, impossible creature drifting through water that should have destroyed it instantly, and it sent the experts straight back to the drawing board. We still can't fully explain what's feeding that entire world. We have shadows at the edge of the light that nobody can name. And the very first time we looked clearly, we found our own trash had beaten us there. Every single one of those facts was a surprise. Every one of them landed on people who were absolutely certain they already understood this place. That's what it actually means to recheck the evidence. Not adjusting a single number, but admitting the entire picture was built on an assumption that turned out to be false. Outro. The footage we have is a single candle held up in a darkness that stretches for miles in every direction. And whatever else is down there, drifting just past the edge of the light, is still down there right now, this very second, while you're watching this. So tell me, what do you think is still hiding down there, waiting in the dark? Drop your theory in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you in the next one. The deep is a very big place, and we're only just getting started.